The Demon Slayer databooks give us more info on our Hashira, like who likes or dislikes who. For Giyu Tomioka, we get an in-depth analysis, like when it came to Rengoku, Giyu really liked him and said Rengoku was very nice to him, saying similar words about Gyomei, the stone Hashira, who Giyu says he respects because he too was kind. The other person Giyu seems to like a lot is Shinobu, who he says talks to him pretty frequently, but he can tell something is wrong deep inside her heart that she won't open up and explain. For Muichiro, Giyu tells the interviewer that he doesn't really speak to the Mist Hashira much, and the same goes for Sanemi, the Wind Hashira, but specifically because he has a really hot temper and it leads to fights between the two. For the Sound Hashira, Giyu comments that he really envies his sense of freedom and says he's happy when Kanroji talks to him, but she shows too much skin, which makes it hard to keep a conversation. However, the saddest one is his thoughts on Iguro Obanai, with Giyu saying when he badmouths me, it makes me sad. Aw, Giyu. Shinobu Kocho has this happy-seeming personality that she puts on, but she's actually filled with rage, despite the fact that she has some pretty nice things to say about her fellow Hashira. For Mitsuri, she says that she likes to love Hashira because she's cheerful and cute, while for Uzui, she says that they had a little bit of an argument after she found out he tried to take Aoi in the Entertainment District arc. For Muichiro, we learned something interesting, which is that Shinobu herself was the one to diagnose his amnesia and his medical treatment after he was brought in, and she calls him a good boy at heart. For Sanemi, who I won't forget this time, Shinobu only shares that whenever they see each other, the Wind Hashira asks if she's doing okay, probably because he himself is not doing okay and can tell she's the same. While for Obanai, Shinobu says sometimes they talk about interesting sword skills they can use with their smaller frames. Lastly, for Gyomei, Shinobu says she respects him from the bottom of her heart, and when asked about Rengoku, she says he was a good person, but there were times where they just couldn't understand each other. Thanks to the Demon Slayer databooks, we know what Tengen Uzui thinks of all of his Hashira peers. Like for Shinobu Kocho, Uzui comments that she's really earnest and a bit flamboyant, but he also says that Shinobu has good childbearing hips, pretty much saying he likes how she has a dumpy. For Rengoku, Uzui says he was so flamboyant and more self-reliant than even him, adding in that Rengoku was an extremely good guy. For Sanemi, he pretty much says the opposite, saying he's dangerous and has a bratty side, and for Gyomei, he says that the Stone Hashira is the first time he's ever met a man taller than him, and says he's ridiculously strong to boot. For Mitsuri, Uzui Tengen also says she has nice childbearing hips, showing that he really does thirst after all of his female peers, but he says despite Mitsuri, Rengoku may have been turned into a Demon Slayer donut, but the databooks tell us just what he thought about every other Hashira. Like for Gyomei, he says the Stone Hashira was blessed with a huge physique that he's envious of because it's so fantastic. And when asked about Muichiro, he says the young Hashira is even more talented than he was at the same age, telling Tokito to keep up the remarkable work. For Uzui Tengen, he says his swordsmanship is beautiful and comments that he was moved when they met because it was the first time he saw a shinobi, but Uzui slightly has too many wives, which is a hilarious way to put it. For Shinobu, Rengoku says she's amazing for her poisons and how she finds a way to fight demons despite her limited physique, and it gains her his respect. While for Mitsuri, his student, he says he loves the creativeness of her techniques and how his Q Jr. utilizes every bit of her talent. Lastly, for Obanai, Rengoku says his senses are amazing and the joints in his arms are even more flexible than Mitsuri, and calls Giyu a hard worker, but says his voice is too small so he's never heard a word he ever said. Oof. Muichiro Tokito got his personality and his memories back in Demon Slayer Season 3, but before that, what did he think of every Hashira as he spaced out in between moments? For Giyu, apparently the Mist Hashira thinks he looks like a decorative object, while for Sanemi, he thinks the Wind Hashira looks like a wolf. For Uzui, he says he looks like a monkey, but once in a while he makes Tokito laugh. For Mitsuri, Tokito thinks she looks like a pink-colored chick going cheep cheep, but says her hair is beautiful. Shinobu Kocho apparently looks like a swallow bird, but has a gentle smile. And how does that work? Because birds have beaks. And when reflecting on Rengoku, Muichiro says that Rengoku was like an owl and that he was a lively person with a pleasant voice that he misses. When asked about the Stone Hashira Gyomei, Muichiro says that he's like a huge bear and the strongest person there is. And lastly, Tokito describes Obanai as a wildcat and a quiet person who has beautiful eyes even though they're both different colors. Obanai Iguro has some pretty strong thoughts about the other Hashira that we learned from the data books. Like for Mitsuri Kanroji, Obanai tells the interviewer that he loves her and says Mitsuri is so cute, he's unable to logically speak sometimes, which really makes him worry if he's okay. For Gyomei, he keeps it short and sweet, saying he's very strong and someone he can rely on, while for Shinobu, Obanai says she's very hardworking and patient. For Sanemi, the Wind Hashira, Obanai says he's a friend that he gets along well with, and when remembering Rengoku, the Flame Hashira was apparently another close friend of Obanai's, with the two talking often, and Obanai saying he had a good personality personality. When asked about the missed Hashira, Obanai says he hopes Muichiro doesn't die because he's so young, and they speak from time to time. Lastly, for Uzui, Obanai says the two talked about their past, and he respects how Uzui never lets his past stop him from living his current life. And for Giyu, Obanai says he hates him because Giyu's expression always looks sad and it irritates him. Let's discuss Mitsuri Kanroji's thoughts on every other Hashira. For Giyu, she thinks that he's quiet and adorable, finding him rather timid, not realizing that he only acts that way around her because she shows too much skin. For Shinobu, she thinks she's really cute and wants to play with her but never has any time, while when asked about Sanemi, she says he's really scary but she finds it charming despite how angry he gets. When discussing Gyomei the Stone Hashira, she gushes over Gyomei's shared love of cats and how she loves the fact that he's the strongest. Apparently Mitsuri thinks Uzui has a lot of sex appeal, meaning she was probably super interested in the Sound Hashira, but what held her back is his immaturity. And when it comes to Rengoku, she looked at him as an older brother who trained her and took good care of her as her sensei. Lastly, for Tokito, she thinks he's really sophisticated and talented for being able to be the youngest Hashira. And Mitsuri shares how she thinks Obanai is a kind person, loves his letters to her, and how he's always so patient with her with a smile on his face. We're nearly done describing every Hashira's thoughts about each other, so let's see what the strongest Hashira thinks about the others since they all have amazing things to say about him. For Mitsuri, Gyomei says that she's a good-natured girl and notices that she likes Obanai. And speaking of Obanai, Gyomei says that he's a very earnest person, but he's sensitive and also catches that Obanai seems to be in love with Kanroji. For Rengoku, Gyomei said that he was a very positive guy who never lies and gained his respect for his endless honesty. And when discussing Muichiro, he says that the boy is able to say things that need to be said, and he has a mature mentality. For Uzui Tengen, Gyomei says that he seems overly confident because he's always boasting, but he never fails to remain cool-headed, knowing what he's capable of. Lastly, for Sanemi, his battle buddy, he says he possesses a strong will and is honest at heart, but feels bad that he was in love with Shinobu's older sister who passed, and says Shinobu herself is delicate but works too hard, though she seems to like Giyu, as he sort of disses Giyu, saying he's inarticulate and gloomy, but he thinks that he likes Shinobu.